Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. This time, we are going to be discussing, we're starting into Modern May, and we are going to be discussing choosing an era, because I think, much like when we did our fantasy one and our mech one, you have to start off making a choice around that idea, and then that will lead to where you're going to be placing your game. And this is especially important in modern era, because as I was trying to figure it out, I was like, what is modern by definition? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we got to really talk about this time. So choosing an era, or what is modern, will be what we were discussing this time. Before we get into that, we're going to do announcements. Always less than 5 minutes on my part. You can time me. Here we go. The only thing we have announcements for as far as things coming up is that we're still doing... Wait, this is coming out in May. So Adventure Academia will have finished. I appreciate everyone's understanding me not being able to put out as many updates. So if I can't do another one with it, had family stuff going on, one of my grandparents had their heart worked on, so I needed to kind of redirect some attention, and I knew that if I was going to try and do update videos on the Adventure Academia, that would have offset some of that. So real life trumped other things. So that was the idea with that. I appreciate everyone allowing me to not getting all upset about it. We'll probably do, I'm not sure, we're recording this before it happens, so I will probably at least do a final reflections. If not, maybe try and squeeze in another update before we get to the end. We will have to see. But that's what we have for now, as far as announcements and appreciation to the viewers. For you viewers and travelers, we are still going towards our goal of $100 worth of support per month from any of the avenues, whether it be Patreon, Locals, Subscribestar, or Direct Contact. And doing that gets you access to our Discord, where we share any kind of extra PDF content that we can put together in the year. And once we finish up all of the Adventure Academias, that's where the first prototype version is probably going to be released, and then we'll see where things go from there. But the prototype version will basically just be my notes, and then people can play with them and mess around with them on their own and maybe give feedback and stuff like that. But that's going to happen that's going to happen next year sometime. That's the plan, if everything goes according in my head. Goes according to what's in my head. That's mainly what we've got. Hoping to get that milestone reached. Let's go to Dan.
Hello, everyone. Dan from Avenue Studios. I'm here, very excited to start on Modern May. We, of course, are live streaming Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we will be doing a Force Forge where we build a one-shot in Foundry based off of the discussions we have here and around the Hearth, taking one or two of those ideas and squeezing them into a 1.5 to 2 hour one shot, and then we play test it out as a live stream at the end of the month. And our supporters are part of that game. So if you want to join the ever-growing force known as Avenue Studios, you can become a part of that as well and try it out. We had a lot of fun with the March of the Mechs game, and as of recording this, April Arcanum is coming up, so I'm pretty excited for that too. Jake is stoked. And yeah, I'm excited to see how Modern May is going to go. I'm really excited for this discussion because it's got a lot. So let's do this.
Indeed. Yeah, Jacob's already got it's not spoilers because it's already happened. Got a right. Ship. So set up so you guys can see us fight on that ship. Mm-hmm. And then tell us now in the comments how we did in there, so that'll be fun. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll say too, all the modules that we make are going to be available on the Forge for people to play with. March of the Mechs was an open legend. I can't remember now what he's doing April Arcanum in. I'm suddenly blanking. Pathfinder Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Okay.
So those, if you use Foundry Virtual Tabletop, all the modules as this year goes by, we'll have them available on the Forge for people to play with Jake's maps and the artwork, all the journal notes, everything's ready to go. You can hop in there and get some players and start playing it. So.
All right. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So with it just being the two of us doing that, and since Levi hasn't started Levi's Pies or any kind of Patreon for it yet,
Nope.
But I gave him an idea. It hasn't come out in the bloopers yet, but I gave him an idea. Right. So eventually, years from now, it's going to come out, and he's going to be like, "Oh yeah!" But that means roundabout way of saying it's time for Levi's spotlight.
To shout out a Squirrel Plays, a once writer more focusing in the TTRPG sphere with a very simple but clear editing style of a squirrel looking around and pointing out to otherwise text most of the time. Video I just watched that I thought was useful for people was being a GM versus a writer. I think both ways, people trying to be on either side of it can get caught into the issues of the tradition they are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he discussed it interestingly. So I would recommend checking it out.
Yep. And
Very cool.
He's pretty easy to find. You type in a Squirrel Plays, and it's got a squirrel as his, picture.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much on track with that one.
Yeah. Though watch out for all of the other videos of just squirrels playing.
Fair enough. Just put TTRPG
As in, I experienced that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or channel. YouTube channel.
There you go.
That's what I did. First thing first, YouTube was like, "You want cute squirrels?" Yes.
Well, I mean, yes, we do, but not right now.
But that was not the goal.
Yeah.
I prefer those to randomly show up amongst other things as opposed to just sit down for it.
Right. So, go check out a Squirrel Plays. Let him know we sent you. I've commented on a few of his videos, but I haven't reached out other than that. So, let him know that the Planar Crossroads sent you. And I think that's it. Unless we got any surprise announcements.
Not now, but there's something that's been in the back of my head that I don't think I'm going to actually do, but it sounds fun.
It's the Levi's Pies. It's finally good. No.
No. Maho's making monthly monsters.
Monthly monster. Ooh. Yes, that would be useful. Oh. Okay.
And it has the same stressing pattern of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Maho's making monthly monsters.
Now you have to have the parody. That's the theme song, and you gotta have the parody. Keep adding to that parody list.
Oh, so many. Like Ancient Magic Pirate Tortoise.
Ancient Magic Pirate. Oh, yep. That fixed.
To play off of each of the aspects of the original.
Right.
That's good. Okay, we can't get wrapped up in that. That's the
Modern
side
May.
of Modern May. So, come on in, travelers. Sit down by the fire. Warm yourself by the hearth and grab your preferred beverage as we discuss Modern May, specifically choosing an era. So, did either one of you want to start?
If there's nothing off the top of your head, I do have some thoughts.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so in every time we talk about why you choose something, there are goals for why you choose that thing. So, first thing first, we have chosen modern. Why have we chosen modern? Isn't an important question. I think a useful thing about modern settings in general is that they are easier to quickly relate to because we are also in the modern times.
That's kind of fair. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when things change or things happen, I think it's in a sense, easier to get more directly in the headspace of your characters because they live a closer life to you, and it is easier to relate to people with closer lives to you in general. So, now, sometimes it's modern, so you can have otherwise pre-existing locations, which is another useful thing of, like, I want this to be in New York City, as so many stories have decided to do. Is part of the reason it's in modern is because it's like, hey, this is a pre-established, known setting that I can work with, and if I warp some things, people will be familiar with it, and I don't have to do all of the rest of the world building to get what I want across. Which is a fair enough reason to choose it. I think going in with this, if you're going modern, I don't know that I would want to stray too far in time from right now for the ability to connect. Because even, like, if you go, like, a full 100 years, there are certain aspects that are similar, but over the course of 100 years in the past, things have changed quite a bit, and it's very hard to predict how things will happen a full 100 years into the future.
Yeah. And that goes into one of the notes I had that was, when you're talking about the modern era, going along with what you're saying at that last part, you're going to have to decide what is modern. What do you mean when you say modern? And as best I can kind of get an idea around it, it's going to be... most people are going to come around right around the turn of the 1900, right around that area. And I'm talking about late 1800s, not early 1800s, but late 1800s. The Civil War in America has finished up, is usually a good time. And then you're going to go, like you're saying, into our near future. That's a large swath of time, and a lot has changed in between that. But I could see somebody saying, well, it's World War I, that's a modern era setting. And I couldn't really argue with them on saying that. I could see how you could say, well, I don't want to go that far back, maybe the 60s or 70s. That's still... you're still quite a ways back there from now.
Keeps getting farther away all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that does kind of bring up the philosophical question of, when are we going to say modern stops being the 1900 era? Like that, and that turn of that century into this century, and starts being the 90s into now, or even the 2000s to now. I could see someone making an argument that I don't necessarily agree with, but having the viewpoint that, well, modern means 2000s and later. I don't really agree with that. I could see someone instead making an argument for invention of computers to now, like personal computing to now. That might make some people happy. But then you'd be cutting out a lot of the 80s, which definitely feels like a modern setting. So...
I guess an important thing about this is, how old are you, and how old of media are you familiar with?
That
unironically,
right? Yeah.
Right? Like, so I do mean both of those, though, right? You could have someone who's like a 12-year-old film buff who, because of that, has like an extensive
repertoire,
at least understanding of media of like much earlier, and like how things are viewed. And so from that, it's like, well, that's from the time that movies were made. That's gotta be modern in a sense, right?
Yeah,
but you could also have someone who was a bit older, but like has not touched movies from before 2005 even. Maybe they didn't get a chance to watch movies as a kid, and then they got up and then they never tried to look any further back.
Yeah.
So they've only got, like, maybe 90s to now as eras that they have any mental attachment to, and that's what becomes modern to them.
Yeah. And I think you're right. As it goes on, this is kind of a bummer, but as things go on, like my kids, we were going through a few things the other day, and I said, yeah, I'm older than YouTube. And they're like, oh, yeah, but older, but they said something else. And I was like, well, I'm older than Google. I'm older than that. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, yeah, but what about the internet? I'm older than the internet. Now, now think about that. A modern person, someone looking back today, like my kid's age, saying, well, we'll just cut it off. Modern is when the internet was made, or became, even if you just cut it off when it was made, not even when it was popular, I'm still older. So we run into that situation there. You've got to pick that out and figure that out with your group. Now, people that play TTRPGs on a regular basis and are looking for something outside of the mainstream, which is usually D&D or something like that, they're going to be already trying to consume something that is, in most cases, they will be trying to consume something that is not your mainstream in the first place. So you probably have an end to them being exposed to things like 80s movies, usually at least. You've got the cheesy 80 movies. A lot of TTRPGers like to watch that. And you could go further and further back. A lot of them are theater kids, which means they're going to be exposed to Shakespeare, which they're going to know is not that's not modern, right? We wouldn't say that was modern. That would be, medieval or something along that line. But not medieval. I'm going too far back then. But you get the point. So you have that stretch right there where you probably have a little leeway ground with people that are already playing TTRPGs that you can work with and be like, and you're going to have to discuss with your group and say, okay, this is set in let's say World War I. So we're going to go with a World War I game, guys. It's just turned 1900-ish, your early 1900s. So what do you guys want? Make some characters that are appropriate. And it's all going to be a fictionalized type of setting anyway. So you might want to discuss things along your modern game of which things you're going to pay attention to. Because most of the time, you're just looking for a good feel. You're looking for the modern feel, not necessarily this is what it literally would be like to play in this. You do want some of that, but you don't want to drag down the game. Call of Cthulhu handles this well, and things along that line, because that happens we would consider Call of Cthulhu a lot of the times to be a modern setting game, because it happens right in that era. So that's a nice one to look at for an example.
Yeah, I definitely think, as you guys are talking too, if you're thinking about people who are in TTRPGs, modern, you basically have like medieval fantasy / Renaissance, then you've got Western and steampunk, and then you're kind of in modern. I think would be very vague generalizations, which brings you to about that World War I era. Just to me, I think that's mass warfare, guns, bombs, some kind of locomotive, or more trains and stuff. But because I think if you got too far back from an RPG setting, and of course argue with me if you think I'm wrong, I think you start to get into that steampunk maybe era or westerns, which I feel like is their own kind of category, even though it's more modern than medieval fantasy, which is kind of bread and butter for RPG. So that's kind of what I was coming at. So it's interesting to listen to you guys think about this from a more almost normal perspective. I was thinking, as an RPG player, you're thinking modern. I'm not in medieval fantasy, because that's what we always do. I want to do something different, go modern, which is an even bigger swath of time. But I think taking away that Western steampunk era, that's where I was initially starting with, like, modern's probably somewhere around World War I going forward.
Sure.
Very generally speaking.
I suppose an important point here is that realistically, if you tell your players and they are cool with it, hey, I want a game set in, and you list time, you don't strictly need to quibble with them about whether or not what you are describing is technically a modern setting.
Right.
You can know that you are going for it for a bit of a modern feel. Though, depending on what you want out of that feel, you might want to know what they feel is modern to see if they can connect with you on the same level with that.
That's fair. I mean, imagine saying, okay, guys, we're going to play something in the 60s. Or, well, let's be fair. We're going to play something in the 70s, all right? They'd be like, oh, all right, yeah. Okay. You get into the game, and they say, okay, I'm going to go look on the computer at the library. It's like, you're going to what? I'm going to go to the library and get on the internet. They're like, no, you're not. There's no internet in 1970s libraries. Yeah. There's intranets, but there's no internets.
I mean, you could go to the library. There's lots of information there, you know?
Right.
Just going to have to use your Dewey Decimal System.
Right. Well, or ask a good librarian. Yep.
See, that's actually a thing that's why in Call of Cthulhu, there is a skill, library skill, like your research skill. And if you were just shifting the further you shift closer to modern, you would just shift that from library to Googling, basically, or Google Foo.
Yeah.
You just change it on the sheet. Google Foo.
Well, because, unironically, Google Foo is a bit of a different skill to be able to quickly and efficiently find good information.
Yeah, especially when they play around with the algorithms with their search engines. Yeah. It's like, oh no, they shifted this. That would actually be a fun way to play off of a weird role, is because for those watching, Open Legend has failure, but the story progresses. So that may be a fun way to do that. You find a site. Yep. You do. It's got information. It has things about it. Yep. It sure does say some things. It says some things.
And you think that you are a great Google Fooer, and you have done your job well.
Yep. And then
you are now certain that all of those plateaus are ancient trees by the aliens.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So that is a specific conspiracy theory for fun facts.
That's true. It is. So
I wasn't just making it up. Yeah. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah. People have said that, like, looking into conspiracy theorist beliefs is such like a beautiful place for TTRPG world building.
Yes.
And it would work great for a modern game. But you wouldn't want to be too modern. So this is something I think actually has really something to play around with. You've got if you set something in the 90s, early 2000s, usually before the 2010s, you'll have this nice ripe area and setting where the internet is just about at the right scale, where you're not having these huge, massive things like YouTube and stuff where you can share a whole bunch of videos, but you got a lot of blogs, you got a lot of text-based websites, and it makes great handout stuff and things like that. And there's so many excellent in quotation marks, excellent conspiracy theories of the time period that it's just, Levi's right, and we're not the only ones saying it. It is a treasure trove to mess around in.
Yes.
Yeah. So. I gotta tell you though, there are still quite a few active at this moment on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Highly active.
And that might actually be a really good point too. If you're playing a modern enough game, you can make a kind of AR type of aspect to your tabletop game where you say, okay guys, here's this. And then you have, because it's not super hard to do like just a text-based site or even screenshot or something like that. A lot of the times GMs already have the skills necessary to do something even in Photoshop like that. So like an old Angel Fire web page, those can be mocked up in just a GIMP program or something like that, a graphical program.
Look up an existing one and just change it a couple ways, just a little bit here and there.
Yeah,
and then be like, no, this was totally what I had planned.
Yeah. And then you put that, you give that as a printout that they get from the library because they went to the library and printed it out. Because you don't have internet at home, you have internet at the library. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with a that's not pseudo, it's an actual modern game, but set just close enough where you get those fun little graphical handouts you can give and things like that. And you got to make sure that you print the date and time at the bottom, but you make it wrong and stuff like that. You make it fit to where they were.
That's great.
Those little touches like that, man, they just set it off. So And speaking of handouts, before I forget, I got it wrote down. To build off of Levi's thing of the areas already mapped out, do you know what that means, GMs? You've already got an overworld map. If you want to play in New York in 1940s, there's already a map for that.
Yes.
You don't have to make it up. It's pretty fun. Pretty good.
Yeah. You can play Call of Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade. A lot of, like, World of Darkness things work really well as modern games.
Yep.
D20 Modern is an interesting system. It's 3.5, mostly nerfed.
I've heard a lot about it. I haven't played it before, but
you want to know the main reason I have a decent amount of experience with it?
Always.
Because Naruto D20 is built off of D20 Modern.
That's funny.
All right, everybody wanted Shadow Clone Jutsu. We get it.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. It's only so useful in Naruto D20. It's real expensive. It's like you gotta have stuff with the leaf, taking the correct occupation and clan, and it's a whole thing.
Also, you don't have. I would assume you don't have a sacred beast entrapped inside your body to draw chakra from either, to make hundreds of those clones. So you ain't Naruto.
Yeah, no. You are not main cast until quite a while into the system.
Considering
the power level is much more controlled.
Yeah, considering the main cast by the end was fighting this dude that had like what was it, the moon as an eye? I'm like,
yes.
Yeah. Little bit of
escalation. You are not even the main cast within the first season when you start out. It takes you to like level 6 to 8 to get where the main cast starts.
Fair enough. Well, that's the funnest part.
That's fun though.
So.
But yeah.
All right. So.
Total tangent. I think something else we're getting into here is tech level is something you want to decide, both in the sense of how easy do you want it to be for people to get themselves around the world? Because in the modern day, if you have the money, you can get most places.
Right. Well, especially if you look at, this goes back to a lot of the changes that happened in, if you're basing it off of our world, again, we fall into that normal-ish type of thing. So we couldn't use that the other time, I don't think. So let's see. Modern normal-ish. Tentatively, that's the thing to put in the comments. So modern normal-ish. But if it's not invented yet, that's okay. And I kind of lost my exact thing I was going for. But remembering what's been invented and hasn't in that era of time, usually a decade, it's nice to pick a decade. Because when you're playing in a modern game, because decades usually matter. Now, in the First War and the Second War, there was a middle period where there wasn't an active war going on. But because of the way it worked and the First and Second World Wars are so closely tied together, it's hard to to say you would have about the same tech level, but tanks would be more present in the second than in the first and stuff like that. So you would want to think about that.
Yeah.
So. The decades is a really good point, though, too, especially because we're talking about choosing an era, because that also gives a lot of feel. Because I was just saying that the Roaring 20s could be a really cool time period to play in, but it has a lot of assumptions.
To be a vampire in the Roaring 20s.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I mean...
No, I do not drink flapper. He's too floppy. I much prefer something more stoic and stocky. Give me businessman. Businessman is good.
Yes. But yeah, the decades can be a really good way, and that could help decide what vibe you want too. Because like we're saying, you go hit the 80s into the 90s, the explosion of computers, you could rip a story off of any of the great old movies from that time. You know, the kid jacking off his telephone at home to get on the internet and like almost cause World War III and all that good stuff.
You watch one of them hacker movies from the 90s where it's like, he hacked into the Pentagon using this thing, and I'm like... You couldn't do that, though.
No.
I mean, you look back at it and you're like, wait, that's not how computers work. You couldn't do that. It's just totally... You couldn't do that.
Movie producers didn't know that's not how computers worked.
Right.
And neither did the audience.
Yeah. Yes. And that's the thing to think about. Does your audience as the GM care?
Right.
/ is it more fun if in your game they describe their hacking sequence like that, even though that's BS?
I plug my modem into the landline, type away. Dude, you've got dial-up. What are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Although that's an interesting point, too, to think about when choosing your era. Are you trying to make it more realistic, or are you going with the Hollywood version of that time period, which is probably made at a later time period? So that's actually another thing that can help you choose, because if you want to go Stranger Things sort of thing, you know, just go into the 80s and just pull off some tropes.
Yeah, that kind of leads into what we're talking about next time, you know, modern things. We're getting... Right. Speaking of next time, we're getting really close. We recorded quite a bit at the front, so I'm not sure if we're actually on time for the 30-minute mark, but we're going to try and keep these at 30 minutes. So let's do final thoughts. I usually start us off, but let's go to Levi's final thoughts this time and come around to me.
Ooh, all right. Okay. So I would say, going back to an earlier thing, if you just want a specific tech level, pick whatever time, get your players on board. But if you want modern for the, personal ability to connect to the characters, find out what feels modern to everybody before you decide where you place it.
Yeah,
that's good.
Kind of get the buy-in before you start.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. I think my final thought would be just going off of that decades again. I think the decades thing is a really good way to look at it, and looking at what tropes our current perspective of those time periods are, and seeing if that matches up with the vibe of the type of game you want to play. Because I think Hitchcock style setting again, I this movie perspective too of thinking, watch where you want reality or movie, and finding the vibe, the type of story you want to tell, and what era does it fit nicely into, and that can help you select that. And then you can start looking at, okay, what are my tech restrictions, how's that going to affect gameplay? I think that's a really good way to see. Movies and books are always a good inspiration for what time period you're working in. So yeah.
All right. And that kind of leads into mine a little bit with the decades thing, because my last final thought is remember the world events that shift how things are allowed to be done in the era that you're going with. So traveling from the 90s, well, even in the 80s, from the 80s into the early part of the year 2000, you could get on a plane and go anywhere basically in the United States. Even if you were underage, they just, you'd buy a ticket, you'd send your kid off, they'd get there, the attendants everybody kind of watch them and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Something happened in September of 2001. So that shift there, that moment changed where you could go immensely on planes without clearance and stuff like that. So those type of moments in history make a big difference on where you're going to be, what travel options you're going to have available in this example to your players. And that's why I think it's kind of one of the best times to play a modern game, in my opinion, and you guys can disagree if you want, but one of my favorite places to play in a modern setting is right there at the cusp, at that change of the millennium. You've got 1980s to 90s, at 1980s to the start of the 2000s. That's a nice place, really good for just enough tech. There's a little bit of internet in specific places. It's just about the right tech level to be familiar and yet foreign enough to a 20-year-old player nowadays to be able to be like, oh, that's just outside of my range. A lot of people like that, things that's just before them or just after them. So remembering those big eventful moments, there's that saying that things change gradually all at once. So just remember that. There's big moments that shift things and then they change to that and then it just kind of goes forward. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Alt history, Y2K actually destroyed the world. Yeah.
Alt Y2K. That's classic, modern classic. There you go.
Right.
There you go. This will truly prove, if you guys watched to the end, the actual thing to put in the comments is modern classic. So
modern classic. Perfect.
Yeah. All right, that's what I've got. Any other things before we let the people go?
Comment below your modern games. What era is your favorite? That's what you should comment. What era is your favorite? Because we just heard Adam's. I would love to hear what other people are playing in.
Yes. All right. Well, as always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
Okay, so for bloopers.
Nice.
I said my favorite. What's y'all's favorite?
Man. I haven't played enough games to really have one yet. Because I start thinking about it. Like, I was thinking about what I want to play. Right now, though, I have to say, I like a little film noir murder mystery. I really love the Telltale game Wolf Among Us. So, I kind of like that. That one's close to that timeline. Man, I don't know. I don't know what my favorite would be. But I like a murder mystery, I think. Maybe the 60s or 70s, just before computers started even being a thing.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Levi?
So first thing first, I do not have a brain that plays well with favorites. I will say that the most recent modern game I was in was a werewolves game set pre-World War I on Block Island.
Okay.
We had multiple times of bringing up a tech thing, someone Googling it, and then us joking about some other aspects, because I don't know what was invented by then.
Yep.
We got into weird things about, like, oh, Block Island is really restrictive on what exact animals live there for werewolves to hunt.
That's
Now it's a survival game.
We didn't really play into that side of it. We're just like, we hunted seals or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Seals.
something.
there you
'Cause,
go.
well, but
It's in the bloopers now. Levi was out there killing baby seals. Oh no.
those are not a good hunt. They do not count. They would not satisfy the spirit of the wolf.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because you have to satisfy the spirit of the wolf with the things.
Yes,
With-
it has to be a real hunt for it to count.
Yeah.
If it's easy, you can't just eat meat. Like, you also, if you are werewolf enough, also known as your primal urge in the game mechanics,
Yep, say it like that.
you do have, at a certain point, so after a bit, you have to only eat meat. Then after that, you have to only eat carnivores.
Oh.
You can't.
Interesting.
And when it says carnivore, I bet you it actually means meat eaters, based on
Yeah.
what the next step is. That you have to eat essence-based things, which is either spirits or humans. Now, werewolf magic will get mad at you if you eat humans. So you better be eating spirits.
Fair enough.
And that's what you did.
All right, so that's
Well-
going in the bloopers this time.
Yeah. That's.
Beautiful.
I'm like, favorite? I am also actually one of those people who is not super familiar with old movies and old eras, and dates do not stick well in my head as a person.
Hmm.
Fair
Now,
enough.
I have played in some of, like, these tech things, and then part of how I do it is I'm just Googling things on the fly to keep myself within the correct sphere.
Yeah, close enough.
While it's on other people's turn, I am having a little Google foo.